Alright guys, so it's no secret that I love the work of horror mangaka Junji Ito. I have almost all of his releases, and in the past I've done reviews for a lot of them. Recently, however, I've decided to private all of my old Junji Ito reviews because I feel like I can do a better job now than I did way back then. So that being said, you will be seeing a lot more Junji Ito related videos on this channel. Some I've already reviewed in the past and others that I haven't touched yet. But today I want to talk about one of Junji Ito's works that I never see getting the love it deserves. People always talk about Uzumaki, Gaio, Tomie, but never Dissolving Classroom. Yes, it's a lot shorter than his other more central works, but nonetheless, I believe that Dissolving Classroom has all of the makings to be a classic Junji Ito story. So today, I don't really have a more specific topic to focus in on, but I just want to discuss Dissolving Classroom and why it's one of my favorite stories from Junji Ito. In doing so, hopefully I can get more people to pick it up and put some respect on its name. Warning, there will be some spoilers ahead, but I'll try to keep it light. Since this is the first video in my sort of reboot of Junji Ito videos, I should probably say that, admittedly, for me, someone who is very desensitized to horror, I can honestly say that I think scary is a strong word for most of Junji Ito's work. There are very few stories from him that I would actually consider scary. I think a better term for it would be maybe bizarre or just off-putting. Of course, everyone has different thresholds when it comes to things that scare them, and Junji Ito may be absolutely terrifying for some people, but all I'm saying is that personally, I'm not losing any sleep after reading a Junji Ito manga. But that's not to say that it's not good. Don't get that confused. Believe it or not, I don't think that how scary something is the deciding factor of good horror, because like I said, we all have different thresholds of fear, but we can still be entertained by horror that doesn't necessarily scare us. I love Junji Ito's work. Like I said, I own almost all of his releases, and I really enjoy every story that he puts out, including, of course, Dissolving Classroom. So, do I think that Dissolving Classroom is Junji Ito's scariest work? No, not at all. In fact, for me, it comes off as more of a fun read than a scary read. Creepy fun, but still fun nonetheless. But most importantly, Dissolving Classroom is memorable. Not that all of Junji Ito's stories aren't memorable, because most of them are forever burnt into my mind, but Dissolving Classroom specifically has two memorable characters that I think have all of the makings to be some of Ito's most iconic characters, alongside the likes of Tomie and others. So let's break down every aspect of Junji Ito's work that makes it so scary or entertaining, and see how each applies to Dissolving Classroom. Firstly, if there's one thing that everyone who's read something by Junji Ito knows, it's that he is a master of body horror. A master of the grotesque, of distorting and twisting the human body in ways that leave you feeling a little grossed out, to say the least. And I think that Dissolving Classroom houses some of the best examples of this outside of maybe Uzumaki. I mean, most of the story is literally about people melting, so you can probably imagine how gross that is. Why is it exactly that body horror is so scary or disturbing to us? Well, for me, it's actually on the lower end of my scare scale, maybe next to like jump scares and other things of that nature, but regardless, we all have bodies, and on top of that, we all know our body's limits. We know what they should do, we know what they shouldn't do, and we know what pain feels like. It's very easy for us when seeing body horror like the things in Dissolving Classroom and other works of Junji Ito to empathize with it, to imagine this happening to our own bodies. It disturbs us because we understand every inch about what makes the artwork so wrong. For example, it's a lot more disturbing for us to see a human arm being sawed off than it would be to see the leg of, say, a giant spider being sawed off, because we can relate to it. Anyways, my point is that Dissolving Classroom definitely gets full points in terms of Junji Ito's body horror, containing imagery of people's brains melting out of their heads and people's faces slowly falling apart. But body horror is often just the surface of Junji Ito's work. Another thing that he does really well is turning the mundane into nightmare. In the case of Dissolving Classroom, Ito is able to turn something as simple as an apology or a compliment into something horrific. To me, this is one of my favorite aspects of Junji Ito's work. He is able to take such simple things that occur every day in our normal lives, and with his imagination, he takes these things and he distorts them. He makes them scary, he makes them bizarre. I suppose I should sort of explain what Dissolving Classroom is about before I go on. Dissolving Classroom, like much of Ito's works, is a collection of smaller stories that sort of make up a larger story. In this case, Dissolving Classroom is actually 5 short stories: Dissolving Classroom, Dissolving Beauty, Dissolving Apartment, Chizumi in Love, and lastly, Interview with the Devil. Similar to how Tomie is made up of multiple stories of different people encountering the succubus-like entity Tomie, Dissolving Classroom is made up of multiple stories of different people encountering a young devil-worshipping man named Yuma and his evil little sister Chizumi. Chizumi is a creepy, evil little girl that likes to scare people and drink people's melted bodies. Why are their bodies melted, you may ask? Well, her older brother Yuma has a very disturbing problem. He apologizes to everyone for everything, or at least so people think, but in reality, he is actually apologizing to the devil himself. When he does this, the evil radiation from his apology traveling through people to go to the devil causes their brains to melt and eventually their entire bodies to melt. There is a similar effect that occurs when he compliments girls. The same radiation causes them to slowly deteriorate, making them uglier and uglier until they too seemingly begin to melt. These two siblings are some of the most memorable characters I've ever met in Junji Ito's work. Chizumi is clearly just straight up evil and demented, her appearance is eerie and unforgettable, but Yuma is the truly strange one here. He never shows an obvious malevolent purpose, but he knows exactly what he's doing to people. I think that because of this, he is even scarier than his little sister, because throughout the stories, his intentions are clear, but also there's always a part of him that seems like he doesn't want to do what he's doing. It's very strange. The relationship between Yuma and Chizumi is also a bit mysterious. It's difficult to tell if they just hate each other or if they are actually working together. And I think that's what makes these two so interesting and memorable. We are told things about them and their past, but we can never quite figure them out as characters. I think this is done intentionally by Junji Ito in order to keep some mystery about them, as he likes to do in a lot of his work. And that leads me to my last point. Junji Ito's work is mostly disturbing due to the unknown. Things we don't understand, the warping of reality. His stories always feel like pieces of a nightmare rather than a fully cohesive story, which is what makes them great works of horror. It f***s with us, and Dissolving Classroom is no different. These siblings are fascinating to the reader because we don't understand them. They don't have a clear motive, they have a fragmented, unexplored backstory, yet they have two of the most interesting personalities in all of Junji Ito's villains, if you will. But there is one more thing that makes Dissolving Classroom so unique, and that's the underlying social commentary of it. On the back, it says, "These scary short stories will shock you with a literal interpretation of the ills that plague modern society." And I asked myself, what do they mean by that? What parts of modern society is Ito addressing here? His afterwords shed some light on the fact that in today's society, people apologize way too much, perhaps because everybody seems to be offended by everything. I'm not sure there is really a right or wrong way to interpret what exactly he is trying to say, but the way I seen it is the character Yuma is apologizing too much, and in doing so, people's brains are melting. This may be a metaphor suggesting that as a society, because all of the apologizing and tiptoeing we often do, we are becoming too soft, too scared, no longer ourselves, melting in a sense. That's my interpretation of it, at least. And then of course, in Dissolving Beauty, as Yuma compliments his girlfriends, they grow uglier and uglier, slowly falling apart. This could be a metaphor that comments on the standards of beauty in our society. The girls in the story physically grow uglier the more they are praised, but they are blind to how distorted they've become, while in reality, it could be that the more people are complimented or praised or pushed towards a certain standard of beauty determined by social media and Hollywood, the more ugly they become as people, the more ugly we become as a society on this quest to obtain a sometimes unobtainable beauty. Not physically, but on the inside. Or maybe it's not that deep at all, but the point is Dissolving Classroom leaves room to analyze. It leaves room to wonder and attempt to understand what the story really means, and I think that's an aspect of a great story. So, in conclusion, if you haven't read all of Junji Ito's work already, I suggest checking out Dissolving Classroom. I can't promise that you'll be sweating in terror, but I can promise you a memorable story, open to interpretation with two very memorable characters. In my opinion, a Junji Ito classic.